Hello and welcome back to Live from the Hive with me, Katie Bessant. In today's episode, I'm joined by the lovely Kay Gibbs. Kay, hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you finally as a guest.
Thank
So to get started, why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners, explain what you do and how you got started in this industry?
Right, hi everyone. So I have been a long time host, and I'm a co-host, and I am now a coach and mentor for holiday let owners, particularly with Airbnb and Facebook, but kind of across the whole spectrum of business. And I started because, like lots of us, I was living in a 3-bed semi and thought I could do with a little bit more cash. I've heard of Airbnb. Let's have a look. And so I used to let out 2 of my 3 bedrooms in my 3-bed semi. We used to do breakfast for them, kind of old school B&B style, and we loved it. We loved the additional cash it brought in. We loved meeting new people, particularly we used to get lots of people from abroad, and we really enjoyed that kind of cultural exchange element of it. So when we were moving house, we looked for somewhere with an annex because we wanted to start a family and wanted to have a separate space. And so we created the Snugget Cafes, which anyone who follows me will know I'm passionate about that. I used to be a teacher. I was a deputy head of a primary school, and so we were doing it alongside that. And then when I had my children, I had planned to go back, as many do, and motherhood kind of changed me, and holiday letting allowed me to indulge that change and to spend more time with my children. And so I gradually built up a co-hosting profile. So I took on properties locally, and I've managed kind of 5 properties across Dorset now, different shapes and sizes. And while I was on maternity leave, I also got approached about being a mentor, which I loved. And so gradually, having mentored one person, thought, okay, I'll put myself out there on Facebook and see if there's anyone else who wants this. And then there were, and it kind of grew. And so I sort of accidentally created a new career for myself, and here we are. People sometimes say to me, do you miss teaching? And the truth is, I just don't. I loved teaching. Teaching was amazing, and I wouldn't change it. But I'm now able to teach people like me how to be successful in their business, which is just an absolute privilege to do. And it's still teaching, it's just teaching in a different vein. And I'm able to spend time with my 2 boys, and so it's just such a privilege. So thank goodness we were a bit skint that summer in 2017 and put those 2 rooms on Airbnb, because it's changed my life.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? There's so many people I talk to, and they've just created they've had a room available, and they've just thought, oh, I'll get started on Airbnb, and then it's just completely changed everything, completely
Yeah,
changed the game.
yeah, it has for me. Totally transformed my life. So I feel really lucky, really lucky.
Yeah, yeah. So you are, sort of a queen on Airbnb, and you do lots of mentoring and coaching people how to improve their listings and get more bookings. So what are your sort of 5 top tips for creating an awesome bookable Airbnb listing?
Katie, I'm just conscious some people aren't watching the video and need to see my eek face that I made when you said I'm the queen of Airbnb. I get called this quite a bit. I have no actual association with Airbnb. I just offer advice. So I don't know. It's like when I was a teacher, if someone said, you're the queen of the Egyptians. No, I'm not. I just teach about it. But yeah, I know what you mean. I've got lots of experience. And what's been great is since I took on that first person I mentored, her name was Jess. She will be listening, I'm sure, because she's now a firm friend. I've worked with in excess of 250 clients doing that. And so actually I started out knowing a bit, and then each client and each experience has taught me more. So yes, I've developed some expertise, but I don't think Queen's quite right. So thank you. So I've thought long and hard about this, because you told me you were going to ask me this question. And so I thought, what are the kind of 5 things? And I've picked 5 that are both impactful, but also all but one of them you can do in about 5 minutes. So they're really quick, easy things that will make an impact. So here they come. Right, number 1 is your main photo. Most people searching on Airbnb will be hovering around a map, scrolling around, we've all done it, looking for a place, and they'll see your price and they'll see your main photo. So that main photo needs to stand out, and that's in 2 contexts. First of all, it needs to be something really brilliant about your place. It shouldn't be a cupboard door. It needs to be the thing that makes your place stand out, your USP, and that could vary seasonally. So If you've got a hot tub, it may well be the hot tub. If you've got a pool, it will certainly be that. If your place is a bit of a party pad, it will be the dining table fully laid with champagne bottles on it. Or, if your place is a great family hub, it might be the kitchen. Do you see what I mean? So it's the thing about your place that makes it special. If you feel like, and my place, the Snug at Capes, is small, it's a studio, it's only for two. So mine is usually the king size bed because mine's a coupley place. So it doesn't mean it has to be something all singing and dancing. It's whatever makes your place special. And there's another way it needs to stand out. I always recommend to people to search incognito for your place. So search your area, go in as if you're not you, go in on a blank web browser and find your place and have a look at the pictures of other places nearby, because if they're all blue and yours is green, it's going to stand out. Or if they're all like yours and my rooms in the background are, then choose blue. So pick something that's going to visually stand out from the properties around you. So that would be the if you do one thing, I would look at your main photo, and I'd also make it seasonal. So you don't want it to be a barbecue in October, and you don't want it to be a wood burner now when in March. You want it to be something, the outside space or maybe the hot tub or whatever.
Yeah, great
So
tip. And would you recommend changing that depending? How often would you recommend changing that?
if it's one that works and you've got a great view rate, so the when you go into your insights, I don't rate the insights massively because they are quite delayed, so it can be quite difficult to see impact. But if you look at them longer term, maybe make a note of them once a month over a year, then you get a bit of a flavour. And if your insights say you're getting plenty of views, that means that your title and your main photo and your initial price are doing okay, and people are clicking on that link. So that's where the main photo will be relevant. So I wouldn't, some people talk about, I know we're going to come on to myths in a minute, but some people will talk about changing things. I don't change things for the sake of changing things, but I change things as experiments. And if you change something and then you find you get more views, then that's worked. But I would definitely, if you've got a wood burner, I would consider having that from, say, August onwards. And if you've got a hot tub or a barbecue or a brilliant outside space or a swimming pool outside, I would consider having that from maybe February onwards. So seasonally, yes, but not if it's a city centre flat. I might leave the same one all the time if it works. Definitely it's an if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of situation, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. So tip number 1, make sure your first photo is really impactful. What's tip number 2?
Tip number 2 is actually photos again, and because they are our biggest. I mean, you're a marketeer. Photos are so big for us, and the way Airbnb is set up, and the way let's face it, modern life and online life is set up is through visuals. So the second tip is about the first 5 photos. And the first 5 photos matter because when someone looks at Airbnb on a computer, which lots of people still do, I saw something recently that you can tell you're a millennial or older if you get the laptop out to do certain jobs. And lots of people won't book a holiday on the phone. It's got to be get the laptop out. And I think I'm a millennial, so I'm definitely there with that. So if you get up on a computer, Airbnb, you will be shown when you click on the listing 5 photos. The first one will be large, and then the next 4 will be in a sort of square next to it. We've probably all seen it now I'm saying that. So that makes those first 5 photos incredibly important. The vast majority of people who go on your listing will only look at those 5. They won't click to go further. So those 5 need to really showcase your place. They need to show 5 different spaces. And those spaces need to be singing in them. So I will sometimes go on people's listings and the first 5 photos are all of one bedroom. And that's just not going to sell your place. It needs to catch people. And then when they click, then you can offer me more detail about each thing. But those first 5 need to be all different, punchy, and really showcase the space. So your best 5 photos, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving a well-rounded overview and really, showing off your property. It's funny as well that you mentioned about the mobile versus computer thing. So when I worked at the holiday cottage letting agency, we did quite a lot of research into this was a few years ago now, so everything's changing. But the initial visit to search for a holiday was on a mobile, and then to actually book was always on a desktop. Or like really high percentage. So I know I'm guilty of doing high,
absolutely
anything which
high
is
ticket items,
tax
returns, applying for maternity leave, or doing all of that on the computer.
Fantastic. So that's tip number 1 and number 2, all about the importance of photos. Tip number 3.
Okay, so tip number 3 is about the title, which won't surprise listeners because I mentioned that when people are scrolling around the map, they will see your photo and your title and your price. So they're the things that you can choose that have an impact. Your title, I think the most common mistake I see people make is just not appreciating how important it is. As long as you appreciate it's important, you can choose how you want to take that. I'll give you a couple of ideas in a minute, but realize that those 50 characters are likely to be the only 50 characters anyone reads about your place. So make them count. And that's the same as I'm saying about the photos, really. It's golden selling space. So again, you can reiterate your unique selling points that you've probably put in those photos, and that can work really well psychologically as a sales tool to match them up, because it makes people think, oh, right, it really is dog friendly, or the hot tub really is great. Or you can use it alternatively for something different if you feel you haven't been able to get that across. What you really shouldn't do is waste those characters on repeating something that is obvious to people when they're looking at your listing. So maybe that's the number of bedrooms, or maybe that's the location, because those things will be showing up either on the map they're searching on, or if they're already looking at your listing, will be showing up underneath. It'll say the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and it'll say the location. So don't repeat those things, however tempting that might be. You might say, say it's in London, you might say central or something that it's close to, but don't reiterate the town or the village or, that kind of thing, because they've seen that. So you can either put in there your unique selling points, which I would really recommend. Or what lots of people do, and I'm one of those people, is I put in my brand name with the hope that it will then send savvy guests to Google to search and then find me in Book Direct. So I, with 50 characters, it used to only be 32 and you didn't have the space for it, but with 50 characters, which I would actually urge listeners to go and have a look, because you might not have updated it since it became 50. With 50 characters, you can afford to put your brand name in and then a colon and then a couple of your USPs. And like we were talking about with the photos, I would alter those USPs now and again, seasonally. I always, for properties I'm running with a wood burner, always have that in there. The one I'm running that's in Swanage on the Dorset coast, I have 5-minute walk to the beach. So again, vary them, see what works, and also focus. Sometimes we're tempted to focus on what we think about the property. Look at your reviews and look at what people say to you and the reasons that they booked, and trust them that they know why they booked, and use those things in your title.
Yeah, fantastic. I was going to ask you about the property names.
Mm.
Yeah, because there's some real mixed feelings about whether you should or shouldn't include it on your Airbnb title. But
For me, it depends if you want to encourage direct bookings. It's the first place to encourage them. Unfortunately, so many guests, and I'm sure everyone will be familiar with this, so many guests just don't click that by booking through a booking platform like booking.com or Airbnb, you are paying additional fees. People just don't realize it. I even have people message me sometimes and say on the Airbnb and say, oh, is there any way I can have a discount or get rid of it? And I'm like, oh, if you'd just gone directly, then yes, but no, not now. Because this is an aside, but I wouldn't ever advise trying to actively convert a booking to direct once they've contacted you, because it's Airbnb's booking. They deserve their commission for that. They've done it. But if you can convert it sooner, great. So yeah, personally, I have the title because I want direct bookings. If you're just starting out and you want to do all your bookings through the platform, then don't do that. Don't waste those characters on that. Cram it full of those unique selling points.
yeah, fantastic. So photography, your photos, and your title. What about tip number 4?
Okay, tip number 4 is your calendar. And I know when we've spoken before, Katie, I've shared with you that when I started out being a coach a couple of years ago, sort of 3 years ago now, I was working almost exclusively with people who are new to holiday letting. And then these days, I work almost exclusively now with people who are new to Airbnb, but not new to holiday letting. So I'm working with experienced people who want to up their Facebook game or up their Airbnb game, or just have a month of coaching to kind of revamp, give them their mojo back and give them some confidence. The number one mistake that those particular people make when they list on Airbnb and say to me, I'm not getting bookings, I can't understand, is that with calendar. Because when you've come from an agency, which is where they tend to have come from, often people have in mind that there will be a short stay and a long stay and a 3-night weekend and a Monday to Friday and a set changeover day, and those kind of traditional holiday models. And Airbnb it changes that. It's a different approach, and that's why it's done so well. It's disrupted the holiday market to a really large degree. And so the number one thing I would share with you to appreciate about that is a 2-night minimum stay. And that will, I'm sure now lots of you listening are going, no, I can't do that. I know you are, because I get that feedback all the time, because you think you can't afford to do that. But the thing to do is raise your price for a Friday and Saturday night, so that that 2-night minimum works for you, and it can sit empty on a Sunday night. You don't want to go in there and clean a toilet on a Sunday. Perhaps your cleaner doesn't work. You have a cleaner and they don't work till Monday. Absolutely fine. Just have it sitting empty on a Sunday and offer a late checkout, and everyone wins. So I recommend a 2-night minimum for a weekend and a 3-night minimum in the week, and making sure that those totals, so your nightly rate plus any management or cleaning fee, gives you what you need it to give you as a minimum, even in January. And then you can set discounts to make other lengths of stay more favourable, because of course we all want longer stays. You can also have it so it's a 7-night minimum in the summer, before, when it's a long lead time. But that's the big one. If you've only got a 3-night minimum set, then unfortunately you won't show up when people on Airbnb are searching for weekends. And if you've gone onto Airbnb as a punter, you'll know your choices: weekend, week, or month. The more than half of searches that are done on there globally are for weekends. And if you've got a 3-night minimum set, you're just not going to show. You're not even going to get that chance for them to see your first photo or your title. So that's my big tip. And if you're thinking, no, I can't, then just that's something to get in touch with me about. I can help you with that, with how to set it up to make it work for you. It doesn't need to mean less money.
Yeah, it's about making it work for you and still getting those bookings.
Yeah.
You mentioned there about people that are maybe just moving over from an agency, and quite often you have to set up your listing again from scratch.
Yeah.
So when should people start to create a listing for a new property if they've still got a contract with their sort of agent?
Yeah. Well, that answer depends quite a bit on the contract. I continue to be shocked at the differences the same company will have had in contracts with various clients. I'll hear from someone from the same company that's got unlimited owner bookings and isn't even on a contract. They can start next week not accepting bookings from that company. And then I'll hear from someone else, the same company, who says, oh, I've got to give 6 months notice, and even then I've got to accept the bookings I've already had. So I can't answer that, in terms of your contract. I would encourage anyone to go and look at their contract. If you're thinking about signing up with an agent, I would encourage you to be really pushy, because what I've learned is that being pushy does work. Go for owner bookings unlimited if you possibly can, because then you've got the flexibility to start by yourself at the same time and build your thing gradually, and not take that leap all in one. But in answer to what would be the optimal time, sort of lead time, it's changed a lot in the years I've been doing this. The lead time typically used to be a couple of months, 3 months. And now for my personal place, in the last year, it's averaging about 10 days. It's that short. So it's longer for bigger places. So the bigger your place is, the longer the lead time. The smaller your place is, the shorter the lead time. The higher the season, the longer the lead time, and the shorter the season. So if you've got a 1-bed and it's January, if you list it, you might get a booking 2 days later. If you've got a 10-bed and it's for August, then you might want to give it 6 months. So, there's quite a lot of variety in this question, but I would say for your average place, you're wanting to list somewhere between 3 weeks and 3 months in advance of when you're open. You don't want to do it too soon. And again, this is something that people will often say to me, oh, well, I want to get summer bookings. I need to get listed now in sort of October. No, don't rush it, because what you don't want to happen is that you list the property and it can't get bookings because you're not open for availability yet. So then the Airbnb algorithm learns you don't get bookings and then stop showing your place to people, just simply because your calendar's blocked. So don't go too soon. I think the temptation is often to go too soon. Wait until you've got some availability and you're certain of when that availability is.
Yeah, so some great tips there about availability and your calendar and managing that. And so we're on to tip number 5. Kay, what's
Oh, we are. Okay. So the last one is the only one that isn't a 5-minute job. This is a little bit more substantial. This is a get out a laptop job, actually. The others you can do on your phone. This is going back to this. This is, right. I was born in the 80s. I better get my laptop out to do this thing. So this is just about completing all the sections. So there might even be sections on your listing that you're not aware you haven't completed. So some that I see that often not completed. One is captions. Captions are a really great win. Because people will look at your photos, the captions might be the only chance you get to describe what's available. So look at each caption. Don't just say, here's a room with a door and it's got a king bed. Tell me about the experience. Tell me what I can enjoy. Tell me about the bedding. Tell me about the luxury bathroom products. Or tell me about the view out of this window and how close that thing out there is that I might want to visit, or the restaurant downstairs. So use those captions. They're not long, and actually that's quite good because they're really punchy and they force you to get something experiential in there quickly. So that's a quick win. Neighborhood is another section that people often don't complete. It's not somewhere that I've ever had anyone say to me, oh, I booked your place because of what you said in the neighborhood section. But, and this is where the kind of myths and legend of Airbnb comes in, the myths and legends have it that section will help with where you are shown on the map and what people who are searching for certain things might look for. So it's worth filling that out. Don't invest hours and hours in it, but it's worth completing that section. But I also recommend having a little bit about the neighborhood in the bottom of your main description, because everyone will read that part. What else? Oh, and your profile. So again, really worth having a decent picture of your face, or you as a couple's face, or you and your business partner's face in your profile, because Airbnb is personal. It is about a person-to-person sales platform. And so it matters to people, particularly when you're new and you haven't got reviews. People will look at your profile and try and suss you out a bit. They might even Google your name. We all do that, don't we? So make sure your profile is warm, friendly, and about you as a host rather than just about you as a person. And then the last one is actually the main description. And this one just occasionally gets missed, because when you first start your Airbnb listing, you are only able to complete the first 500 character section. And then once you've published that, you can then go back in and complete the detailed, it's called Your Space at the moment. They vary it as time goes on, but it's usually called Your Space. That bit, often people haven't realised you can go back in and add loads more detail in there, and that's your main selling space. So once someone's seen they know they can book for a weekend, they've seen your brilliant price, they've been drawn in by your title and by your pictures, they've clicked, they're on their laptop now, they're ready to book, they're looking at the first 5 photos, then those are the people that scroll down and read your description and go, oh yeah, this sounds brilliant, this is great for us. So that's the main place where you really draw in the bookings, and sometimes people just haven't realised they can fill that in.
Fantastic. Yeah, some really great tips for listeners to go away and implement, as you say, like 5 minutes to do some of these jobs. But get your laptop out for that, for
Yeah,
that last one.
for the last one.
But yeah, they're always adding new things as well, new checkboxes and all sorts. So it's just going on and just doing a bit of maintenance, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And like I said earlier, going on and looking at your listing incognito to just check that everything is as it should be, that's key.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned about the myths and legends of Airbnb. One of the myths or legends that I hear quite frequently is owners who are constantly checking their own listings. What are your views on that?
Yeah, okay. So I'd like to preempt this because the first thing to say is, although I am I'm experienced with Airbnb and I've worked with lots of people on Airbnb, I'm not, as I say, an employee. I'm not on the inside. And the one opportunity I've had to be on a call with someone who is reasonably high up in Airbnb, and someone else asked her something about this kind of, how do the algorithms work and why is my listing shown and this one isn't? And she went completely stone-faced and just was not going to answer anything about that. So there is certainly, I think all of us in holiday letting, even if you don't use Airbnb, it has this kind of mythical beast thing going on with the algorithm, and no one really understands it. And I'm in that group. I don't know the facts, but what I do have is some pretty good guesses based on lots of experience. And because I'm lucky enough to get lots of feedback from clients all the time, as well as my own listings, but there's no certainty. Nothing that I can recommend is certain. They're my best guesses. So I just want to preempt it with that. And it's all, I kind of take it as fun. It's all good fun trying to suss it out and play a game with the algorithm and make it work for you. But the thing I would encourage listeners, before I get onto the individual things, I would encourage listeners to just think about that the Airbnb algorithm is designed to make money for Airbnb. And that's not a bad, monstrous thing. It's there to make money for a business. That's what we're all doing. But once you get your head around that it's designed to make money, then you appreciate that it's therefore designed to show the listings that it believes guests will pay to stay at. Whether that's because they have recently made a sale or they recognize that guest is very well suited to that property, whatever the reason, it's designed to show listings that will make money. So it's our job to make sure our listings look like they can make money. And so this thing about people looking at their listings quite often, or getting other people to look, or sometimes in particularly American Facebook groups, I'll see people saying, oh, I'll go on and wish list your property if you wish list mine. My view is that is going to have a negative impact, because what you're doing is creating lots of people going to look at that listing and not booking. That's not teaching the algorithm that your place is going to make it money. It's teaching the opposite. It's teaching it that when people come to your listing, they don't book. There's something wrong with it, and they back out. And so then Airbnb will show your place to fewer potential guests, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy then, because then you just don't get seen, and then your chance of getting booked. We all know that there's a saturation in some areas of the market. You can't afford to be the one that isn't getting booked in those. So I would actively, lots of the myths that come up, I think, it's not going to do any harm. But that one I would actively discourage you from doing. Don't go on and look at your listing unnecessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about sort of updating your listing constantly?
Yeah, this is another one you see a lot, isn't it? That people saying, if I do this, then I get a booking. Well, I think with this one, I don't think this is going to do any harm. And I think the type of person who goes on and fiddles about with some captions or changes the price for a night in May or whatever you're doing is going to probably be the same kind of person who has a really up together listing and it's close to being optimal. So I think although there's not a causal link, there probably is a correlation between those people who do make regular updates and those people who get bookings. But I would encourage those people, instead of going on and just doing a little thing, be a bit more deliberate about it. Decide what you're going to do and make those change, and then see if there's any impact on those insights or in your bookings, and see what's happened. So I don't think there's any harm in regularly changing photos or captions, or as long as they're really of a high quality. Don't swap something out that's less good just because you want to make a swap.
Yeah, it's really interesting as well when you do go on and make a big change like that. So I changed photos on mine once, and overnight 3 bookings straight away. And it might have just been a coincidence, but yeah. Are there any other sort of myths that you hear about quite often? Those are the main ones that I come across.
So there's another one that's not a myth as such, but I think it's really worth a mention here because it helps people understand what I was talking about how the algorithm works. And that is about momentum. If you follow me on Facebook, you will undoubtedly have seen me talk about momentum because I'm big on it. Because of how Airbnb works, if your listing has recently had bookings and is converting views into bookings, Airbnb will then show your listing to more people because it thinks, I'm using the word thinks for a robot, but you know what I mean, that this listing works, let's show it to more people, we'll get more commission. So if you can build momentum, that's where we see the most successful listings. And some people that I've worked with will successfully convert that initial momentum that you get given by Airbnb into something more long lasting, and they'll make that last for years and be almost fully booked for years. It's phenomenal. And others of us, myself and my little listing included, I quite like a quiet winter in the snug. I'm not big on lowering my prices particularly low. I don't want it back to back. I make my money in the summer, really. So, I sell bits and bobs, but the momentum's not there. So then come the spring, I need to rebuild momentum. And I'm quite proactive about doing that. So I might lower my minimum nights. I rarely lower my price, but I might lower the kind of total amount that's needed. I might do a little bit of rejigging of photos, that sort of thing, in order to kind of boost my listing and get started again. So I just urge people, rather than thinking about going on and doing individual things, just think about momentum and how you can build that. And sometimes it's worth making some flexibilities to gain a couple of bookings, and then you're back on the right track, and you can build them. I tell you one thing I would really avoid, though, on that, and I didn't plan to say this, but I just thought of it, that if you are tempted when building momentum to get someone else, a friend or something, to book, fine, but do not give it to them at mates rates. Because if you do that, the algorithm learns that you're only worth that amount. And then when you try to put it back to a sensible rate, the algorithm will think, well, that's really overpriced. We're not showing that to people because they won't pay it. I've made that mistake and
Yeah.
learned from it.
Yeah, that's some good tips for those hosts, which, yeah, as you say, do have a quiet winter and are, getting started again in the spring to sort of get their listing rolling, build up that momentum again for the next season. So some
Yeah.
great tips there. Yeah, it's a bit of a tradition on this podcast now to ask those who are hosts themselves about their worst guest experience, because I know how lonely it can be when you're a host and you're doing this by yourself, when something goes wrong and it just feels like it's the worst thing ever when it's something that you've put all your love and heart into. So yeah, I'm just asking all the guests on the podcast what their worst guest experience is. So I'd love to know about yours, Kay.
I love that, and I completely agree. It's it can be quite a lonely job, and that's something I really love about my job. Is I don't feel lonely anymore. I've got a lot of people that I work with, and people who immediately send me a WhatsApp if they have a negative guest experience, and I'm happy, and I'll send it back to them too. So we I know I've pre-warned you of this because I've actually changed my worst guest ever story because it's very new. So a couple of days ago, I received my first 3-star review ever. And it definitely, I got an email from Airbnb telling me there were issues and I'd received a 3-star review. And it did make, my heart sank. I felt like, oh my goodness. So, but there's a happy ending to this story. So bear with me, listener. So I had a guest stay for a month in one of the properties that I manage, not my own, thankfully. And he was what I think we'd all call a needy guest. I'd like to say he was naive rather than purposely difficult, but it was one of those where there's a lot of questions and a lot of demands and a lot of asking things that are already in the guidebook or not knowing where to put the bins and asking for extra cleans and all sorts of, I think we've all had guests like that where there's just every extra that could possibly be. So I'd ended up spending quite a bit of time on it. But I was delighted to have a month-long booking in a January. Brilliant. So when it came to checkout, he left me a note saying that he'd broken a lamp, which is fair enough. And actually, I thought, well, for a month-long stay, he'd paid quite a bit. I would have happily written it off, but he'd offered in this note, so please let me know how much it is. I'd like to pay. And so I thought, okay, fine, I'll make a claim through Airbnb. And one of the things I love about Airbnb is air cover, because it just takes all the kind of awkward, oh, please could you bank transfer me this much kind of stuff out of it if there's any damage. And so I found some replacement lamps. It had to be a pair of lamps because one of them couldn't be replaced. It had to be both, which he'd been very understanding about. He paid. Great. And then I got I got this review, and he'd put in the review that he was asked to pay for the lamp that he'd broken. So it was very fortunate for me that he'd put that in the review, because it was clearly a retaliation review. He'd also put in it there were a number of problems during the stay, and that he'd been asked to pay for this lamp. So I got this 3-star review, and I've been doing this long enough that I was quite reflective about it. I was thinking, okay, well, it had to happen at some point. But I thought, it is a retaliation review. He's annoyed that he paid for this lamp. He's annoyed he had to pay for 2 lamps in the end, essentially. So I thought, well, it is a retaliation review. I'll report it to Airbnb just on the off chance. And because he'd been a very difficult guest anyway, very difficult. He's certainly someone I wouldn't want any of your listeners to be hosting. He was really hard work. And left things in a bit of a mess. And yeah, it was difficult. So I thought, okay, I'm going to see what Airbnb say about this. So I got in touch with them a couple of days ago, and it took 3 messages for the review to be removed because it was a retaliation review in breach of their policies. And that was really clear. And it was so easy. And it having been my first experience of this, I've had clients who've, said, oh, what do I do? Should I wait and not ask this guest for money? And I think there is a risk with that. There is a risk. It's one of the loopholes of Airbnb that I don't enjoy, is that you can, if you seek additional money from a guest, and then they can leave a review because they're disgruntled. And if it's a 4-star review, then it's tricky. But my experience over the last week has shown me that if it's a 3-star review, and this one also, I had all the evidence of our messages where he'd said how much he loved it and how great it was, and all the evidence of me doing everything he needed, that this review was just removed straight away. I woke up in the morning to a message from Airbnb saying, all done, thanks very much. It was so refreshing. So it's a good worst guest story, Katie.
Yeah, amazing. That's yeah, I've not really heard of anyone being able to remove a guest review before, and I know, yeah, when you do get those reviews or when you've got one that isn't quite as you're expecting, it's just
Mm,
it's
yeah,
such a horrible feeling. So
yeah,
that
yeah. I've heard of a fair few. Obviously, it's the sort of thing that I get involved in a bit. People will get in touch with me when they've got problems, and so I know it can happen. But to have that first hand experience was great, really pleasing, really nice to have that support there. Because again, I've sort of alluded to this, that we can. It's very easy for us to complain that Airbnb charges commission and it's expensive and things, and they do. But I personally can't compete with that marketing budget, and I also can't compete with that support. And I don't have to do any of the admin; they did it for me, so that's really nice.
yeah,
So it was a good one.
you got some new lamps. Yeah, so
Yeah.
your worst guest experiences.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, but he is going to come and collect the other lamp, though. I should
Oh, really?
let you know that. He messaged to say, I'll need to collect the other lamp that I've paid for. Okay, yeah, you can come and get the matching lamp. That's fine.
Wow.
Each their own.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast today, sharing all your tips on
Oh.
Airbnb. Where can listeners find you?
Oh, thanks. It's been really lovely. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. So anyone who has heard of me before will have heard me through Facebook, probably. That's where I'm usually hanging out, and most of my clients are. But I know yours are mostly on Instagram, so I'm hoping I might get to meet some new people through Instagram. And I am there. If you just Google Kay Gibbs Holiday Let Coach, I will come up. I've got a Facebook group called UK Airbnb Hosts, which isn't just for Airbnb, but it's just the word Airbnb is synonymous with holiday let, isn't it? So it's a good way of people finding us. I've got a little shop that I think you'll share the link for, Katie, and you can also find me at www.kgibbs.com. Where I've got a blog and a link to my shop and various other bits and bobs. And I
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kay. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kay.